Hi, welcome to another episode of the TeleWellness Hub podcast. I'm Marta Hamilton, your host, and today we're going to be talking about rewriting the way we speak about traumatic experiences with Dr. Brandon Shurn. Dr. Brandon Shurn is here. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Marta? Thanks for having me. And just please call me Brandon. Don't
Okay.
just call me Brandon.
Well, Brandon, I'm really grateful that you're here. You have a really amazing background that I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about. Brandon, I almost said Dr. Brandon Shurn again, but Brandon has an amazing background, a practice called EmPowerMe Holistic Counseling. And he is a mental health professional, a counselor, educator, holding a doctorate of philosophy in counselor education and supervision, and a Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. He is a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Maryland and a licensed mental health counselor in Florida. And he's currently also a 2022 FINRA fellow, an accredited financial counselor candidate, working on completing his experience hours to qualify for that designation. And along, like, with all these amazing things that he's doing in his spare time, he likes to hang out with family, watch movies, exercise, and recharge with a good book. I feel like just your background alone, there's so much I want to talk about. But before we dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about why do you do the wellness work that you do?
Because it's just in me. It's in me. You know, one of the things that I had always struggled with, and the way that I got here to the therapist couch, so to speak, metaphorically,
Mm-hmm.
is wavy. You know, I started in law enforcement. Actually, to go
Oh,
forward, I started
wow.
to go back to give some more context to your audience. I started out as a high school dropout, and and then to be where I'm at. So, but in the career paths was law enforcement, and that's where I really got to see people expose the seedier side, the darkness of people, and the
Mm-hmm.
struggles that people deal with, and building rapport and all of that stuff. So I didn't know it because I started in the jail, but I didn't know it at the time. But that really laid the foundation for
Mm-hmm.
me to have that ear, to build rapport, to connect with people. And so in this space, it's about just empowering folks that you don't, you know, you don't, you might have a diagnosis, but you're not that diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you have a diagnosis of anxiety, is it your anxiety or do you struggle with anxiety? And once we rewire the way that we talk about it, we rewire our brain
Mm-hmm.
in talking about it, and that's even with trauma as well, and which is my specialty. So yeah, I got into it because I wanted to empower folks, and it comes, a lot of my own history is with that as well, that I learned after the fact, because I want to have impact, and I was trying to find out, how can I serve my generation? How can I do it? And this is one of the ways. It's just giving back and getting people in a space where they're mentally tough, and able to handle and navigate the challenges of life. So
Amazing. This is why I am loving doing this podcast, honestly, because I, in the past, I've gotten to hear colleagues speak, maybe in more academic, professional presentations. But when I get to ask that first question of like, why do you do this? And I'm kind of like, wait a minute, I already want to ask a lot of questions, like to let people know and let people in and open that door to, I went from high school dropout and just the wavy. I love the way that you describe it, because I often talk about, a wellness journey, or our journey is not linear, and it's not all peaks and mountains and sunshine and rainbow. There are valleys. So I love the way you described it with it was wavy. It was wavy to get here, and just the impact that is your mission to empower others. That's incredible. So yeah,
that
yeah.
but that bleeds into everything, Marta. That's the reason that I'm like, okay, how can I make more of an impact as
Mm,
a counselor in the clinical space? Okay, let me get another license so that I'm not just stuck in Maryland. Now, granted, there's a lot of need in Maryland.
yes.
There's also need in Florida as well, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
in other areas. And so if I could make if I can make myself legally able to do things and to
Yes.
reach out, then I want to be able to do that. Um, and that's really where it's at. It's a labor of love, and it even bleeds
Mhm.
into the going into financial counseling and doing that. And when I talked about it, there was a time when I talked about it. So it's FINRA Foundation Fellowship. So it's a
Okay.
scholarship that is given out to military spouses,
Oh,
and
okay. Thank
and it
you. I was going to ask, but that was one of my questions. Like, let's talk more about what that is. I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a financial foundation, and it's all about financial wholeness, and it kind of gets into this space of behavioral economics, and so the
Okay.
ways that psychologically we use money or not use money, and
Mm,
how our behavior and our psychology is so associated with that, and the purchases that we make or when we make purchases. It's a lot of stuff underneath it, in the sense of amassing debt, and so understanding all of that, and so being able to have this whole package for people, so I can walk with you in whatever pain point that you are experiencing, because financial hardships is another thing that contributes to mental health issues, to speak more clearly. um, so
yes.
yeah, I'm just, my wife said I do too much, and it's like impact. That's what I think about. It's impact. She's right though. I've learned how to slow down a little bit, um, and what the things that I get my hands involved in, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult.
It can be really hard to say no, I think, especially when your mission is to make an impact. And clearly, you've been gifted with the drive, the passion, the education, the I think the drive is a big part, the intelligence, of course, all those things, knowing what you've been after, and what you've been doing. I think that's amazing. And I I feel like, especially, you mentioned the right now, talking about the financial aspect, right now there's a lot of conversation about what the market looks like, and there's a lot of anxiety about career, finances. Can I afford this? What can I not afford? People are having to make decisions. You brought up,
Yes.
behaviors and decision making. I do definitely want to talk a little bit more about your expertise in trauma, but I'm curious to see, just to talk a little bit about how you see that aspect of, because I saw on your website, in doing the research for this episode, that you work with anxiety too. So I'm curious what you see in today's society and today's climate when it comes to some financial uncertainty. Kind of what are some things that you noticed, and what kind of recommendations do you have in regards to helping people navigate financial anxiety? Yes.
Yeah. So I would say the very first thing, in all honesty, is being honest with yourself. If you know that you have a tendency to overspend, and you know that maybe you're in a market, meaning you're in a career field that could be on the chopping block, or your job could be on the chopping block if downsizes were to happen at your organization, then being smart with the way that you utilize your money is important. We have discretionary spending, and that ranges the gamut from deciding to go to McDonald's or whatever favorite restaurant that you have, to all the way to the type of vehicle that you buy. Not buying a vehicle, but the type of vehicle that you buy. Because if you need a vehicle, okay, you can get a good used one. But you want that. That's it. So you want that new vehicle with all the bells and whistles. That's discretionary spending, and you put yourself in a bind, unnecessarily so. So you look at discretionary spending. Where can I cut back? Then you look at another space that you can look at is, okay, I have these variable expenses. I have these things that I'm not sure, they fluctuate from month to month. Utility bills, because that's based off of usage. Gas, water, electric, if you have gas and electric in your house. But can I minimize that? All of the other things that, kind of fluctuates. But then there are fixed expenses. And one of the more fixed expenses is your mortgage or your rent. That's pretty stable. So you
Mm.
take all of these piles of money that you spend, and you begin with the obvious stuff, right? How much can I cut back from going out to eat? How can I, make more meals at home, right? Or if I go out to eat, how can I, make it so that I'm picking from, more, I guess, economical space, and I'm
Mm.
spending from, so all of those things, but that requires you to look at yourself and say, okay, where's my mindset? What is my, a lot of, we talk about a lot of money mindset, and what is my
Mhm.
relationship with money, right? Because some people equate tightening the belt to almost confining themselves and being in jail or something like that, financial
Yeah, like a
jail.
punishment somehow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a punishment. So budgeting is a punishment. But if you budget and you're telling your money where you want it to go,
Mhm.
then honestly what you're doing is taking control of your money, and your money is not controlling you anymore. So,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. You're being the leader in the
yeah,
sense and taking control. Yeah.
absolutely.
No, that makes perfect sense. Well, I think, I mean, I know that you said your wife has mentioned you're doing too much, and maybe you're like, maybe I am, but I do see, speaking from experience as a therapist, I saw finances come up a lot in sessions, and I'm not equipped to be a financial advisor, coach, and counselor, and so that makes perfect sense. It comes up a lot. It is very much so interwoven into our everyday life.
You mentioned too about going through the darkness earlier when we were talking.
Yeah,
Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? I saw on your website that you had counseling for anxiety, counseling for grief and depression, and for parents, but I saw a tab that was called Through the Darkness. And now I know too that you have, yeah, a background. You said you've seen kind of some darkness too in your line of work and maybe through others. So I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about that aspect of your life,
yeah.
professionally, personally.
So I will say specifically through the darkness, it's a personal thing. So by my 17th birthday, I had been deliberately set on fire. I had three guns pointed at my head, and I actually had been shot. And the getting shot, the doctors had told my parents, prepare to lose your son. And that was, yeah. So, and so I survived that, and that got but it wasn't until later on in life that I began to reflect on that, and so how it informed a lot of the things that I do, and the passion that I have. So going through that darkness, I had to actually reconcile it. Like, a lot of people say, you come to therapy because, you had a therapist or whatever. I didn't have a therapist. And that wasn't in none.
Jerk. Right?
Yeah.
Like being nervous. I just kind of, yes.
No, but so I go through that, and then but it wasn't until I entered, because I was figuring out how can I have impact. I wanted to have impact. And so I've been looking at, so everything that I've did or positioned myself to do was always about something bigger than me, and giving back, and helping other folks, and being a net positive in the world. And so that was the thing that I was trying to do in law enforcement. And then I wanted to be a lawyer, and the same kind of thing. But then when those didn't pan out, I was like, okay, what else? Where else can I be?
Mm.
And then, I landed on counseling, and I just never looked back. It was off to the races. It was like, whoa, like that fit. And so I just get to blend everything, every life experience. But it was going through that training that I began to say, wow, okay, you know what? Yeah, those things were rough. And, how can I use that to empower others, though? To empower other people that are, or have experienced, the trauma or traumatic experiences. Because there's some, there was some anxiety that came with that as well. And there was some depression that came with that. And there was some grief that came with that. And so having to go through all of that darkness, I had to, I had to face it and say, okay, I cannot control how life happened to me. I couldn't control any of those three events, but I can control how I happen to life. So the thing that I do in response to the event, and that became my focus. And Empower Me Holistic Counseling is the benefit and the outworking of that.
I mean, what an incredible. I'm just really grateful that you share that with me. What an incredible testimony to the ability to, from darkness, be the light. So it's not just like entering the light, you enter the light and now you are the light for others who are in that darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gives that's the passion that I have. It drives it because I know when I did survive, I knew that at that point that there was a greater purpose that I played in this world, and I had spent, the better part of, probably about 15 years trying to figure it out, and I thought all of those spaces, and it was in this space because I can I was like, whoa, and it fit. And I was like, okay, so this is a place where, people still don't want to see me, just like police officers. No one wants to see a law enforcement officer, right? So no one wants to see me. But the only difference is the goal is to empower folks, to empower people to say, okay, your life dealt you were dealt something, and life happened to you in a way that is distressing and very, traumatic in that sense. And you can't control that. But you don't have to remain a victim. You can become a victor. You can rewrite the rest of your life and respond to it and take control of it. So,
What does rewriting it look like? Like, how did it look like for yourself, or how does it look like for others now? Having gone through, you said, 15 years, you're trying to make sense of it, and I appreciate you sharing that too, because I think sometimes we feel like we need to do the healing, have the answer. Let's transform this for good right now. But sometimes timing is, we don't always have timing meet our expectations, right? So I'm
yeah.
curious for you what it looks like and now how you facilitate that for others.
Yeah.
Rewrite.
So that the event itself, that happened, like it happened over 20 years ago. Right. So actually more like 2024 going on 25 years ago. So like a quarter century ago, when when it hit me. But what I had to do was I realized that the response, the response that I had to those events determined the severity of it. So if I viewed it as, you know, I'm weak and I have no power and I have no control over life, and I continue to look at it from this negative, then yeah, I'm going to stay in that space. And it intensifies because everything that happens, I'm filtering it through that lens, that filter. But when I change the filter and I say, okay, my perception has changed now. I get to choose. And this is some transactional analysis where I'm not operating from what is called the parent or the child ego state. I'm in my adult ego state and I'm taking new experiences, new information, and I'm deciding how to deal with it right here, right now, which blends my Gestalt theoretical orientation, right? So in the here and now. So I'm dealing with things in the here and now. And that was the thing that I had to do with all of those experiences. I had to pull them into the now and work through them, right? So for every disfigurement that I experienced, it's not the having the three weapons pointed at my head, that was more of a psychological thing that I had to work through. But the physical scars that I still bear from the other two, I had to work through those things in the here and now so that I'm no longer um, bothered by those things. And then I can comfortably talk about it and share, with you and with other people. Um, so
Yeah, because I think that's something you bringing it up, being able to talk not from the place of pain anymore, but speaking from the place of healing
Mhm.
so that it might help someone else who is listening, someone else that you encounter, someone else. It may facilitate for them that process also of rewriting, healing, uh, and being in the here and now. I am sure, I mean, this is no easy task. So you talked earlier about being like strong.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning we talked about being strong. So we were mentally strong. Like,
Yes.
you're not kidding. You like physically strong. It is having to. You mentioned about you can rewire your brain, and I assume like I've sometimes have described kind of you can rewire your brain similar to the more we practice a language, we rewire our brain to think in that way. I'm
Yes.
assuming a similar process. I'm not a trauma specialist. I should be really clear about that. So I'm curious about just how that looks like in terms of kind of rewiring our brain to look at it differently, what that looks like when it comes to how we speak about traumatic experiences.
The the biggest thing is saying, understanding, becoming really clear on the idea that the experience happened to you. You are not the experience. So the rewiring the way that you talk about it. So if you experience a, what, like a trigger or some sort, right? Or you lash out and you say, I'm sorry, that's my trauma showing up. Okay, well, I can't do anything with that. Because if it's yours, if I try to help you and take it from you, you're gonna fight me. You're gonna put up a fight because you take personal ownership over it. But if you reframe it, that's the first part of rewiring the brain and the association with the traumatic experience. It's talking about it differently. It's saying, I struggle with. But if you have an emotional outburst and you say, that's my trauma, the thing to say is, I'm still struggling with this effect, and identify it, whatever it is. If you are still struggling with the fact that you were the victim of a circumstance, then you get really, really clear on what the stain is, because it's the stain that we have to address. And or if we want to talk clinically, it's the symptoms that we have to address, the things that continue to show up in your life. So once you are clear with those, then we can say, okay, what do I have control over? Right? What can I influence? What can I stop? Because you can't undo the event. And it's getting the brain to understand that the event is done. What's replaying is your memory of the event. And there's a lot, and so there's a lot of regret and there's a lot of doubt. So I'll put it this way. You know how, if you've ever got into an argument with the person, I've never argued with anybody a day in my life. Hell, I'm lying. But but in those arguments, you know how after the fact, the argument is done, but after the fact, you are mulling over and you're like, man, I should say this. And what you are doing is just you are keeping it fresh in your mind, as opposed to saying, okay, no, it's not it's done. I said what I needed to say. And but you don't let it leave. You keep it alive. You actually keep blowing the breath of life into it. The more you think about it, you focus on it. So it's the same thing. But the problem with the traumatic experience is not that you're breathing life into it, it's you've never deflated it because you keep avoiding it.
Mm.
And so it's the fear, right? That fear avoidance. And so once you turn and face it, that's when it that's when it becomes less of a thing. That's when you take the oxygen out of it, because now you're no longer afraid of the stain. You're no longer afraid of, and you're not trying to create a separate pattern of living. to be fair, the thing that you do immediately after the trauma, I call it a creative adjustment. That's a Gestalt language. That's some Gestalt stuff. It's a creative adjustment. So in the immediate aftermath, if you need to structure your life in such a way so that you can begin to, get some sense of normalcy, that's fine. But it's when it becomes a pattern of behavior that it becomes problematic. And so the avoiding the street, if you were if you got T-bone on a particular road, in the beginning, you're like, okay, I'm not going to drive anymore. I'm more comfortable being a passenger. That's fine in the beginning. But if you say I'm never driving again, because now you've just created a problem. Because now you've definitively said, I'm going to stay in this space of victim. I don't trust myself enough to be in a vehicle or operate in a vehicle. So I'm going to cede control of operating a vehicle over to whoever is willing to drive. I hope that makes sense, but
That makes
it's okay.
sense.
Okay.
Thinking, I'm really glad. I know you mentioned, you have your license in Florida too. I'm thinking how incredible for people who have gone through darkness and also maybe don't know who to speak up to about it. I mean, that's a big thing, probably, to even bring it up to the surface is scary.
Very.
Yes, how nice that someone who is equipped, not just professionally, but also has navigated through this themselves, to stand by their side to feel even stronger when they're facing that fear head on. You like, I'm strong and I got backup and I know this person's going to help me face this fear.
Yeah.
That's incredibly empowering. And I also was wondering, what loved ones, like I'm thinking about family, friends, parents, just siblings who maybe don't know how to react. They don't want to be a trigger. They want to be supportive. What kind of recommendations do you have for them? I know that's kind of a little different perspective, right? Because it's not the client per se, but I'm curious about that aspect, kind of just for anyone listening who maybe knows someone who's walked through something really traumatic. And we don't want to like tell people like you need help, right? Like necessarily, but
And
support them and navigate them towards options that they feel like ready. But that's sometimes what comes up, right? Like read this book, do this, but what can people do instead and effective and lovingly supportive?
this is a good one because it really is, Marta. Thanks for bringing this up. The main thing that a person who hasn't experienced any, even if you have, let me just be honest, even if you have, it's not your experience. And so it's not your experience. So you need to understand that the person that is having the experience and the response to this distressing event is not going to be the same way that you were. So it's allowing them to experience it. Right? You don't have to, because a lot of the time the fear from what I've heard about people is allowing folks to stay in this excuse making kind of space. And so you try to make them toughen up. What it signals though is if you don't have the bandwidth to say, to sit and hear, right, then acknowledge that. But sit and hear and listen to the extent that you can. It's not about trying to put yourself in that person's position or view or any of that stuff. And definitely don't try to one up them and say, man, I know because I did. Please don't do that. Because it minimizes the experience that the person has had, right? And so just being a willing ear, you don't have to sit and hear all of it, just hearing a little bit and being willing to do that, it can go a long way. And I'm gonna say, and this is to no fault of anybody that, in my life when I was growing up and I had those experiences, no one knew how to deal with it. I was, I don't know in my circle growing up, I don't know anyone that was deliberately set on fire. I don't know anyone. Well, I know some people that were robbed, but I don't know anyone that had three guns pointed at their head and was just like ready, like give me everything you got. And then there's a few people that I know, but a vast majority of the people at that time when I had went through that stuff, there was really no one. I was it, and so I became the poster child in the sense of how to navigate this stuff. And so it bears even with like even my tattoos and stuff. Like people ask and they say, "What does that mean?" And it's like, "What is it?" And I tell them it's armor. It's armor. And without getting into the weeds, I'll say it's not. It's an outward expression of an internal realization. And so it goes all the way up. It's like breastplate and all of that stuff. But it's because of the things that I've endured. And it's to say, it's an outward symbol that says, I've been through some stuff and it sucks. But I know what it's like to be on the other side of it.
Well,
So definitely don't try to, let me give people some advice. Don't try to one up, just be a listening ear. And if it gets to a point where you say, you know what, I can't take anymore, it takes humility and strength to recognize where you are weak. If that's your fault line, then let that be. But that's it. But the more you get comfortable with, and then ask the person, hey, how can I support you?
mm,
Simple stuff. Simple stuff. How can I support you? Instead of trying to tell the person what they need in that moment, how can I support you?
yes, no, those are really helpful suggestions. And yes, the take home message is don't try to one up, don't try to relate, because no. But and ask, think, ask, right? You said
Yeah, just ask.
listen as long as you can. So that's very helpful. Brandon, how can people connect with you?
I'm on my Instagram is where I'm doing a lot of EmPowerMe Holistic Counseling stuff. I'm releasing, I call them small doses there, and then on YouTube I have what I release is called Full Dose, where I'm giving more explanation to these things, and so I kind of walk through some of this stuff. If you go on YouTube, you'll and look up EmPowerMe Holistic Counseling. I have a bunch of videos on what I call doses of empowerment, and I talk about the 5 things you need to know about trauma and kind of go a little more in detail about that stuff. And so, so any of those places, that's where I'm active. My website is EM Holistic Counseling. So you can read more about my specialties and what I offer in that sense. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Wonderful. I'm going to check out that YouTube. I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes.
All right. Appreciate it.
Ease to check that out. You can check out the show notes here for this episode, listening right now. And yes, Brandon, thank you so much for being a part of this wellness journey with us. And
Awesome.
I guess before we end, for you, it would be for those who are working on setting wellness goals or actively working towards their goals that they have for themselves towards healing. What words of encouragement do you have for them?
It takes strength to know that you need help and to acknowledge it. A lot of times we have this idea that we have to go it alone, that in order to be strong we have to be able to go through. And people say, well, you went through and you didn't, because I didn't get counseling when I was young. But the problem is that's not a bragging right for me. That's not a bragging right, like I did it without counseling. No, I wish somebody would have put me in and talked to somebody. I probably would have healed a lot faster. But but I didn't. But when it became clear to me, I said, "Oh, okay, this is what I need." And then I said, "Okay, I know now." And so it takes strength to know where your limitations are, and then to reach out for help.
And thank you so much. It's so encouraging. And again, thank you for walking this wellness journey with us.